Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Aditi Mehta, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager for our Travel Solutions here at Pros. Today we have Omar Mirabi, who's the Product Manager for our real-time dynamic pricing solution. We're really excited to have him here to share the new capabilities that they've recently released for RTDP, also what they plan on bringing to market in the next few months. I'll hand it off to him in very soon, but I just want to go over some housekeeping tips. All lines have been muted to reduce interruptions and delays. We will have time for your questions at the end of the session, so please at any time feel free to type in your questions in the question tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. And now I'd like to introduce Omar to begin today's session.
Hello and welcome to the Pros Real-Time Dynamic Pricing product webinar. As Aditi mentioned, in this webinar, we will be going over the various new features that we'll be giving you, our customers, some insight as to what we've been working on and some of the exciting functionality to come in the very near future. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Our next RTDP release will be RTDP 7.0, and the expected release date for this release is August 8th of this year. So in this webinar, we're going to be focusing on the several upcoming features in this RTDP 7.0 release. But in addition to that, we also want to briefly cover the content of the following RTDP release, which will be the RTDP 7.1 release. The current tentative release date for this release will be November 10th of this year. Some additional patch releases are expected in the form of RTDP 6.17.1, which will be released on June 28th. Now, these releases typically contain various bug and defect fixes for that particular branch of RTDP. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. All right, so let's jump right into the feature discussion. So with RTDP 7.0, we are officially releasing RTDP Ultimate, and that will be our new, it will be coupled with our new dynamic pricing feature. And this feature is going to be exclusive to RTDP Ultimate. And I'll also be walking you through our new competitive strategies user interface. This new interface will address some critical pain points that our customers have experienced with the previous interface while maintaining and building on existing functionality. We're also going to be supporting existing frequent flyer tiers in segment rules, which will allow our users to define scenarios for booking exceptions that involve frequent flyer passengers. Now, with each release, we always make it a point to improve and enhance our UI. And when this release, we're enhancing our filters to consider via point filtering on the availability screen. This release will also contain some various bug fixes and important security updates for our product. And this really is more of an effort for us to always keep our product up to date with the latest software and security standards. All right, let's jump right into the features. So with RTDP Ultimate, as I mentioned, dynamic pricing can now be enabled and is able to be configured through specific channels. So the user will be able to configure specific channels for dynamic pricing to apply to, specific markets. The minimum stay conditions are also supported. These basically allow the user to configure which fares will be eligible for dynamic discounting. And finally, it will be compatible with class-based pricing. So what are really the benefits of dynamic pricing? Well, the feature gives airlines a competitive advantage through stronger pricing algorithms achieved through the addition of dynamic discounting to our real-time dynamic pricing solution. Now, I want to mention that our studies have shown that the potential revenue uplift from dynamic pricing within RTDP alone is 1.5%. Which is fairly significant for this solution by itself. Now, this functionality is available in RTDP 7.0, as I mentioned, for customers who have upgraded or purchased the RTDP Ultimate Edition. And for customers who already have this edition, we do have a full dynamic pricing solution that leverage other RTDP travel product suite products, such as OND and OneSearch, which seeks to improve this revenue uplift even further. So now to move on to the next RTDP 7.0 feature. We now support the frequent flyer tier within segment rules. Now, the frequent flyer rules are a type of segment rule that are used to support the airline's frequent flyer program. So then, what kind of benefits does this give to the user? Well, basically through this feature, it'll allow the user to define various scenarios for booking exceptions involving frequent flyer passengers. And really to expand on the kind of exceptions that you can now configure, the user is now able to set exceptions such as evaluation override, forced bookings, and forced waitlist. And these exceptions are able to be granted to passengers that meet that criteria of a specific frequent flyer tier level. The user can also expand on this criteria and add things such as departure date range, specific class, or even the hours prior to departure. Now, these frequent flyer rules can now be created through the Segment Rule Strategies UI, or they can be loaded directly into RTDP through the Segment Rule REST service for those of you who don't use the UI. Moving on, let's talk about the new Competitive Strategies UI. So to give a brief background of this feature, Competitive Strategies allows users to define strategies that adjust availability based on competitors' prices and the airline's own specific strategic goals. Now, these strategies aim to give our users flexibility by offering a wide array of user-defined criteria for the sake of targeting specific availability adjustments in order to match and beat your competitors' fares. And now to kind of illustrate this, I want to go through a few screens of the actual Competitive Strategies UI itself. Now, the idea here is to allow the user to create a competitive strategy by setting various dimensions. Users will be able to specify the OND that the strategy will apply to, the connecting airports, if any, dimensions like the point of sale, carrier code, compartment, and the days of week that the strategy will apply to, among other various date dimensions. Now, once the user has decided on the dimensions that they wish the competitive strategy to apply to, they can then define the actions and assign the actions that they want that specific strategy to take. So the users can start by defining conditions such as the days prior and can optionally specify the booked and forecasted load factors respectively. Users can then select which itineraries this strategy is going to apply for, what the strategy type will be, so basically whether or not they wish to match up or down to the competitor's price. The exact number of seats, targeted class, and a price floor, if they wish to set one as well, are some more dimensions of actions that the user can take. Finally, the user is also able to apply an offset, which can either be an actual amount or a percentage to offset the competitor price by. Again, with all these options, it's really about giving our users the same flexibility that they get with the current Competitive Strategies API. And our final screen here is an example of what the Competitive Strategies UI looks like once the users have configured a number of competitive strategies. So the chart shows the home and competitor fares on the desired days, as well as various fare adjustments that have been made as a direct result of applying these different competitive strategies. Users will also be able to edit, delete, activate, and deactivate strategies from this screen. Really, this screen gives the user a clear idea of the impact that their strategies has on their fares and is able to put them in a more strategic position moving forward. Moving on to the next feature, an important and heavily requested enhancement we have made to the RTDP UI is allowing users to filter by via point within the availability screen. So constantly enhancing our RTDP UI is always a top priority for pros. And we always seek to give more options to enhance the overall user experience while still trying to maintain that granularity of the various RTDP features. Now, moving beyond RTDP 7.0, I do also want to talk about the upcoming releases, with the first being RTDP 7.1. Our 7.1 release is currently targeted for November 10th, 2018. Now, we've received a lot of feedback from our users, and we really will be taking this feedback into account for the simulation design process. So since simulation will be a fairly large effort, and we want to incorporate as much of the requirements and feedback that we've received thus far, we plan on targeting the completion of the design process, which is the first step in the simulation feature, in version 7.1. And once everything is validated with the design, we will continue implementation of simulation in a future version of RTDP. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and I've been mentioning throughout the webinar, we always strive to continue to give users flexibility when using our system. So we'll also be including the possibility to delete multiple market strategies via an API. And then soon in a separate release, we'll also be adding that functionality to our UI as well. So as I mentioned before, continuing to enhance our UI is always one of our top priorities, and this will continue to be the case moving forward. We will release some more details as to the specifics of the different interface enhancements as we get closer to 7.1, and it will be addressed in the next product webinar as well. At Pros, we take security extremely seriously, and we will continue to work on making sure RTDP always remains up to date with security standards. We also will work on various defects and bug fixes to enhance the overall customer experience when using the product. I also wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about what comes beyond our 7.1 release. So I'd like to actually introduce to you all our real-time partner availability product add-on. Now, even though this will be a separate product from RTDP, I wanted to mention it in this webinar because our RTDP team is currently working on integrating with this new product. Through real-time partner availability, RTDP will support the cascading of availability requests for the goal of retrieving accurate code share availability in real time. So what are the benefits of availability cascading that our new product add-on will provide? Well, it basically seeks to increase the overall bookability by providing that accurate availability from partners. Now, when you take a step back and you think of a traditional non-interactive code share process, airlines typically will not have access to their partners' last seat availability. Now, this is largely because airlines never have the most up-to-date availability from their partner side. This stale availability really also leads to overbooking and the many fees that are associated with that. But by providing real-time accurate partner availability, this product add-on seeks to mend all of these problems by increasing sales, by allowing partners to access those last seats, and thus significantly lowering the risk of overbooking. And now with that, that concludes today's webinar. In order to find out more and get more details on our new features, please check out the Pros Connect webpage, which will be updated on release. And to remind everyone, the release date for RTDP 7.0 is August 8th. Now, Pros Connect will also contain various release summaries, configuration, and installation guides. We do also have a question and answer forum on the website for any questions you may have about various system features in the new release. Again, thank you very much for attending this webinar, and we look forward to continue working with you all and give you product updates as they come. And now I'd like to open the floor for any questions that Carlos or myself can answer for you.
Great, thank you, Omar. I just want to remind everyone that you can ask your questions through the questions tab in your GoToWebinar panel. So if you have any, we'll give you guys a few more minutes to just type in any questions that you might have. Okay, we do have some questions coming in. For dynamic pricing, what is the interaction between dynamic pricing and competitive strategies?
So the question is, what is the interaction between the two?
Correct.
So they're separate features completely, right? So dynamic pricing will be available in RTDP Ultimate, whereas competitive strategies will be available in RTDP 7.0. While there's not really a direct interaction between the two features, competitive strategies usually applies more on the in the end when the fare adjustment is going to happen. So after all the strategies apply and the discounts apply, then the user is able to adjust that availability based on the competition's price. So competitive strategies would take place at the end of the workflow.
Great, thank you, Omar.
You're very welcome. Any other questions?
No, we are waiting to see if there's other ones. And just as a reminder, like Omar mentioned, you can go to Connect at any time to interact with the community there. We do have a question. Is dynamic pricing adjusting fares or inventory class?
Okay, so dynamic pricing is adjusting the availability for all channels, those that are enabled to receive the dynamic discount, and also for those that are not enabled to receive the dynamic discount. However, it also provides enough information to apply a discount on channels that are enabled for dynamic pricing on top of the filed fare. Right, so basically we are figuring out, in order to reach a given price point, which is dynamic and continuous in the price curve, what fare class should be open. And then we also provide the discount percentage that needs to be applied to that fare class in order to reach the very specific price point. So the channels that are enabled for dynamic pricing will be able to offer this price point, while those that don't have the ability will only be offering that lower class available, which would be a slightly higher price point.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. And then there's a follow-up question to the original question about competitive strategies. Will a competitive strategy algorithm be adapted to fit dynamic pricing and not the class logic?
So it is an interesting suggestion. We would have to study that further, but it does make sense for us to consider which classes are being opened by competitive strategies in order to make sure that we don't further discount those down, right? So we will definitely consider the two price points that we would reach to, one by dynamic pricing, one by competitive strategies, and make sure that we're offering the one that makes sense for the requesting channel.
Okay, and then we have a question about simulation. When will be the first user-facing version of it? When will the first user-facing version be available?
So that's a great question. At this point, we have not determined that exact date. However, we will definitely update you as we get more information about what that date is going to be. As I mentioned, we're going to be mainly focusing for RTB 7.1 on designing simulation and incorporating all the user requirements that are associated with that.
We also want to remind everyone that we have the ability to simulate the impact of strategies in availability using the PROS APIs in our RTDP admin service. However, as Omar was mentioning, for the UI version of it, we'll have to do some additional work before we can release it with the quality that we all expect.
Great. And then there's a question about real-time partner availability. The cascading will be both for shopping and sell. Will there be some sort of cache to offset the volume of shopping?
So for this, for our real-time partner availability, it will be only availability cascading. We will not be handling the sell cascading as of this time. The reservation system will be handling that. However, we may expand this functionality further as time passes and as we see the need for it. But right now, we're currently only doing availability cascading. And yes, we do plan on incorporating some caching mechanisms as well as backup for this process.
Great. Then we have a really good question about if we want to further understand dynamic pricing concepts of RTDP, what's the best way? As you know, DP is very broad, and we would like to understand what all the areas that RTDP is covering.
Okay, so in this case, it would be important to set up a specific call. We encourage you to contact us directly via email, and that way we can set up some time to bring in other product experts from PROS, and if you can share the questions that you would like addressed before the session, that would help us prepare to make sure that we can deliver that content.
Yep. And we can coordinate with your customer success manager to make sure we get that time set up. And yeah, the follow-up to that, we can reach out to you directly after this call to make sure we get you in touch with the right people. Great, thank you everyone for all your questions. I'm going to give it a few more minutes just in case there's some lingering questions, but we really appreciate the discussion. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else come in, but this session was recorded and we will have the slides posted on Connect as well as sent directly to you via email. And that way you could share with your colleagues And again, we appreciate your attendance at this webinar. We try to do these on a quarterly basis so that way you get up to the minute information about what's happening across all of our travel solutions. So thank you, Omar. Thank you, Carlos. And thank you, everyone in attendance.
Thank you very much.